Hello, welcome to Health Professions Week. My name is Chris Ryan. I'm an instructor and a product developer here at Kaplan.
And I'm Dr. Jeff Kochi. I'm a director within Kaplan's national office. Chris and I are going to spend a little bit of time talking about growth mindset today. Growth mindset is, when I think about it, it's sort of a way of thinking about yourself as a learner, and extending beyond sort of yourself as an individual learner, thinking about your relationship to a learning community. So Chris, tell me a little bit about what growth mindset is.
The concept of growth mindset and its sort of opposite fixed mindset were developed by Carol Dweck, who's a Stanford psychologist. And the way I'd like to back up and think about it is growth mindset is an antidote or a solution, in a sense, to a process that happens in all of our brains, which is kind of a rock slide. And the rock slide starts with some phenomenon that causes you to question yourself. It's somehow a negative. Oh, I'm struggling with this sample MCAT organic chemistry problem. That's the little rock at the top.
Yeah.
And then the bigger rock. This means I am not good at organic chemistry. This means that I am not going to do well on the MCAT. This means I am not going to become a doctor. This means I'm not going to ever be happy in my life, right? And that all happens in a flash before you realize it, subconsciously. And that those final big thoughts that are very catastrophizing can become very self-limiting, and we believe them because they've kind of snuck in under the surface. Fixed mindset is a particular kind of boulder that comes down the hill quite often for lots and lots of people. And that boulder is, you're not good at this. You're naturally not so good at this thing. You are naturally not a good learner, or you're naturally not good at science. You're an A student or a D student. It could even be something you're good at.
As a former pre-med, it reminds me of this notion that I had in college of I'm just not a good test taker, and I'm sure that many students who are pursuing the health professions recognize that that notion. They've heard it said amongst their friends. They probably said it themselves. I'm just not a good test taker.
Yeah. So that fixed mindset, I was born with this or I wasn't, in particular around intelligence. Even that term intelligence seems like that's something, maybe she was born with it. Maybe he was born with it. It sounds like something we are born with, but what growth mindset is about is it's knowing and feeling and believing that you can get better at this thing. You can get better at organic chemistry. You can get better at the MCAT or another standardized test. You can get better at learning itself. That's really what growth mindset is about. Now, it doesn't say, oh, then just snap your fingers and suddenly you have it. And
it's not pull yourself up by your bootstraps ideology. It's much more complex than that.
That's right. Growth mindset is often conflated with, well, if you just tried harder, you'd get it. See, you must not have a growth mindset. You're one of those fixed mindset people. And so it can become even a bludgeon. The idea is that growth mindset is this belief that you can get better at something that's necessary but not sufficient. To switch over to our LSAT assumption friends, it's a necessary condition. It is not sufficient for actually getting better at something, but you need it. If you don't first believe you can get better at, say, juggling, I didn't bring my juggling balls, we could, but if you didn't believe that you could actually learn to juggle, then why even start? Right. So yes, in order to get better at it, what Carol Dweck, who's the Stanford psychologist who developed these concepts, what she says is that you need passion, you need persistence, and you need actual guidance and education on how to get better at that thing. But underneath it all, you need this belief that you can get better.
And with that belief comes then improvement perhaps in motivation or sustainability of a motivated state, which of course translates to certain behaviors that then benefit the student in the long term towards reaching their goals. Is that correct?
Yeah. That's right. So I'd like to turn to you and ask you about how you see these concepts of growth mindset tying into empowerment.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you know, what I really appreciate about growth mindset is that it changes the framing, it changes the relationship between a learner and struggle. It changes the relationship between a learner and the outcomes. The outcomes actually become secondary to the process of learning. And I think when we encourage students to think more about the process of their learning as opposed to what the outcomes need to be or should be or what the students expect the outcomes to be, it allows the student to think a little bit more dynamically about what are the things that I need right now in order to support the learning process that I'm engaged in. So the advocacy part of this comes in when I begin to think of what are the needs that I have for resources, for context, for an environment, for mentors, coaches, teachers, for learning resources themselves, like the materials. What do I need? What do I have accessible to myself, but what don't I have accessible to myself? And so what do I need to begin to ask for? Who do I go to ask for those sorts of things? And then looking and extending outward to the learning community, what do we as a learning community need? What are the environments that we need in order to achieve collective success or collective learning?
Right.
And so that's the advocacy part that I think comes out of a growth mindset.
That's
approach.
so central. The fixed mindset is a very passive, receptive, receiving learning. And I'm in here if I'm struggling. That is a sign that I'm not very good at this naturally, and I'm in here alone. Shifting to a growth mindset helps you realize, okay, I can get better at this, and you know what, I'm not alone. I come out of my cave and I see, hey, there are a lot of other people who are kind of trapped themselves, and I can be part of building a learning community to get better at these things, whether it's in my academic classes that I'm doing now or in my preparation for the MCAT, DAT, OAT, et cetera. In that process, it's freeing, it's empowering. So if you put together I can get better at this and I'm not alone, those become self-reinforcing. As I realize how much I am not alone in my struggle, then I realize I can get better at this.
And it begins to move individual learners from the framework of competition to the framework of collaboration, which for students pursuing the caring professions is a really important sort of mind frame shift and cultural shift. Because healthcare is now increasingly so delivered in an interdisciplinary, team-based manner, where collaboration and co-creation of meaning, of interpretation, of data analysis is really key to the care delivery process. So students can utilize their experience of preparing for an MCAT or a DAT or an OAT or the GRE for that kind of cultural shift. They can begin to move out of this notion of I have to be protecting myself because this is only a competitive environment, to one of, oh, well, yes, I want to maximize my outcomes, I want to maximize my learning, but the way that I can maximize my own learning is by being engaged in a community of learners.
In community and collective action, in a sense. So the first step really is then come out of your shell and leave your ego in there and realize you're going to make mistakes. You can get better at this through embracing and examining and releasing your mistakes, and realize you're not alone. Put together, start to become part of, an active part of that community of learners. How can people do that?
Well, you know, for students to think of, well, what communities can I access? What communities am I already a part of, and what communities can I become a part of? So, you know, start with where you are. You know, if you are already part of a study group or you have a study buddy, that's a great place to start. Looking outside of those immediate circles, though, you can begin to identify other organizations, perhaps organizations that operate locally, organizations that operate nationally. Student clubs are a great place to go. Organizations that provide academic resources, supplemental resources is another place to go. Just continue to think bigger and bigger about your learning community.
And we'd love to be part of that conversation too. That's one of the reasons why we work on this. We are in the student's corner. We are coaches. We're not the judges. So that's one of the reasons why this growth mindset and empowerment, these topics are so powerful for what we do, and we'd love to be part of the conversation and help you all out too.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for being a part of this conversation.